Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Nemeth, CEO of Opus Training. Welcome back to Basics. And today I'm really stoked to talk with Anthony Fassio, Chief Retail and Operations Officer at Verve Coffee Roasters. What makes Anthony so unique is his specialty in taking these craft brands from a local favorite to a national phenomenon. He was at Salt and Straw, Shake Shack, now Verve, and he's really built the operational foundation that allows these beloved brands to scale without really losing what makes them special. So what also makes today special is that I actually met Anthony, God, I should have counted the years, but like
Maybe not.
over a
Maybe
decade
we don't need
ago
to.
when we worked at Hot Bread Kitchen. And even then, you could really see that spark of Anthony really being able to thoughtfully cross his passion for sustainable systems and his support for people and product quality. So today, I'm really excited to dig in. Anthony, welcome. I'm so excited to see you.
Thank you. It's so great to see you. Thanks for having me. And maybe we don't need to count the years. I mean, it's so fun to be able to see your career and what you've done for our industry from starting at Hot Bread Kitchen. And then I remember when I was at Shake Shack, you were doing some translation for Gramercy Tavern. And
Yeah.
that was just like at the time, like revolutionary to think, hey, our training materials might need to be in different languages because there's different people, right? And now here we are. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I think like that's the thread that always brings us back together is food and people. So maybe we can start with tell us a little bit more about you and quick intro of yourself, and then what is Verve Coffee Roasters?
My career has been joining brands that are at the established state, but ready to really scale and prepare for kind of that next step. And a big element of that is building an infrastructure and a communication flow and succession planning and team development. And a huge element that has been a crux has been the training. Up until Opus, like we're using, you know, Google Sheets, handwritten, or just like knowledge from someone that's getting passed down from one to another. And it's really hard to scale a brand that way.
Mm.
And some of the other platforms are functional, but it just they weren't clicking in for our industry. I joined Verve a couple months ago, and same thing, right? Like we've got about 300 employees. We've got 14 cafes in the US. We have 6 cafes in Japan, and plus our whole wholesale and kind of direct to consumer component of the business. And here we are trying to scale, and it's just really hard to get everybody on the same page. So super excited for this moment for Verve Coffee. I'm currently in our headquarters, which is in Santa Cruz, California, where it started. And our co-founders, Colby and Brian, started it 17 years ago, just as a way of like, hey, third wave coffee is coming, and they thought we could do it a little bit better and a little unique, and started to serve a little surf town in Santa Cruz with this small little roastery, and Ryan would roast and Colby would run the cafe, and it just slowly, awfully grew up until today. And it's a very well established brand, and it's really exciting to just be a part of it at this stage.
Can you explain what third wave coffee means for those of us who are not that
Yeah,
savvy on coffee?
I think okay. First wave's like Folgers, right? If you
Okay,
think about the
that's what I
can
figured.
that were once upon a time. And then second wave is like Starbucks. And this notion of like, hey, you can come, we'll make a drink to order, we'll pull espresso, we'll create a cafe space that's really just focused on coffee. And you can come in and kind of hang out. And then third wave coffee took that and said, hey, maybe there's some thoughtfulness in the way that we procure and buy green coffee. There's a way that we can build relationships with the producers and growers across the world.
Mhm.
Most of the coffee grows in South America and Africa and parts of Asia, and so it's a complex supply chain, and it's a complex sort of just world. And Verve from the very beginning has been buying their own green coffee. They've got relationships with producers going. In fact, our buyer right now is in Honduras, sort of going through some cuppings and seeing
Oh,
what's
cool.
coming on right now. And Colby, our co-founder now CEO, he said that he was kind of educating me that there are some producers we've been working with for 6, 7, 8 years, and that's a major impact for those farmers and growers, just to have some stability and to also know where their coffee's going.
Well, and you have such a deep connection just to the story of Verve. I want to get into some of the other brands that you've worked with, but I can just hear it in your voice. Like the story is so amazing. I'm curious, when you're coming into a brand, what is the first thing that you're assessing in order to understand like the lay of the land?
And the first thing I do is just spend time with the team and visit everyone, meet everyone in person, understand who they are. And in those visits, you start to hear some feedback or some questions or the excitement. What really drives the team? Where's the passion coming from? And that's important for me to just get a foundation to understand everything. And so when I first started with Verve, I went and visited all our US cafes, and I literally looked in every single cabinet. And I was like,
That
what's in
actually sounds
here?
like you.
I know, right? You know me and you get that. But I was like, what's in here? What's in this drawer? Why is this here? Oh, this is interesting. Like, oh, surprise. I didn't think that was going to be in here. Um, and it's just a way to like fully understand. And so then I went through our training, like our onboarding barista training, and spent time with our trainers to understand like how are we educating and bringing people into the team. And that gives me a foundational knowledge to say like, okay, now I can at least relate. I'm not an expert, right? But I can at least relate and have some understanding. And what happens also through that, by spending time with the team, you really start to absorb the culture. And all the brands I've worked for have been phenomenal brands that are really industry leading in their categories. And the core of that has always been culture, a connection to the brand, a connection to the mission, and a connection to each other. And going through that kind of process of onboarding really sort of gets you indoctrinated with that culture, which is super important.
So then, we're talking about Verve, but I also, I know that Salt and Straw and Shake Shack, they have these really amazing brands with really special cultures. So as you're thinking about building systems for growth, how do you make the decision between like what is sacred and what needs to evolve? Like what's the divide? Is it always just culture is here and everything else can change?
No, no, because it's interesting. There are some things that seem maybe superficial that have a big impact on culture.
Mm.
Like a particular checklist. Maybe you think like, oh, that's, whatever, it's a checklist. Like, let's change that. But there might be some ways of working or habits or elements of a checklist that can touch the culture. And so it's really important to understand that. And
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time with the team, like I said, and I also spend a lot of time with the founders or co-founders to just understand their vision of what this company is and what it means. And then from there, you can start to assess of like, okay, cool. The way that we count our cash at the cash register is straightforward, right? Like we're not touching culture there. Like, let's do it. Let's make sure we have controls in it. That's all good. But maybe the way we set up our merchandise wall is very different because that tells a story. That's an immediate thing that a guest sees when they walk into the space. And different brands have different ways of sort of expressing themselves through the merch wall. Yeah.
It's interesting that I have a question about prioritization in a minute, but
Mm,
there's something here around like when you think about like what's sacred versus what needs to evolve, there's this error that I think some leaders make where just because they're new, there's like theater
mm,
involved. So like, okay, well, that needs to be digitized, that leaderboard up there, or that
mm.
checklist on the wall. And I think you're bringing up something really important. Sometimes it's working the way that it is because it's so deeply tied in. And so, like, if you were to get rid of the, you know, wrinkly
Totally.
piece of paper on the wall, people
Yeah.
might throw a fit
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's a part of what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the number one thing I always ask the team when I'm getting to know them and I'm spending time with them is tell me what to do. Like, I'm here to help you. That's the reason why my role exists. And so what do you need from me? Like, what can I do? And they'll tell you. They'll definitely tell you and have opinions and thoughts. And that helps me initially understand, okay, these things, they're working. We don't need to touch them, right? Like, maybe it worked in a different way for a different brand, but here it works this way. Here's the areas that, okay, let's solve these. And then I try to just bring them along and have them involved in either task force or just like feedback, ask people to pilot things is really important. I think one, because I mean, there's two things. Like superficially, it's change management, right? And if you don't manage the change, like chaos can happen.
Yeah.
But the more important thing and what drives me is involving the team and doing pilots and having task force, like gets us to the real answer, gets us to something that actually is going to work and is going to stick. And I found when you do that, things that get implemented are way more successful.
The idea of a task force, like, is that something that every brand has responded to in the same way? Like, is this something that Shake Shack had always done, but maybe Verve hasn't? To me, it's obvious because I'm in tech and we do this all the time, but in food, it's
Sure.
kind of a different
Yeah.
way of thinking.
I think there's always a positive response. I kind of learned the idea of task force or just like cross-functional teams working on things from Shake Shack. Shake Shack from the beginning was very good at saying, cool, let's do this. We may know something from the HQ, but we need our line cooks in these conversations, right? We need our openers, we need our dishwashers, the shop managers, the regional managers. So I really learned the impact of that, and that definitely goes right to the ethos of Shake Shack and Danny Meyer and Randy Garuti, who was the CEO at the time, of just like, we're all in this together, right? So like, let's go figure it out and let's do it. The other brands I worked for had not done it, and so they got created and got presented, and they were very well received. I
Mm.
think it's important to make sure you're involving a representative from everywhere. So if it's multi-regional, having somebody from each region. If there are multiple roles, then making sure that there's someone that is representing everybody.
I love that as sort of like the 0.1 and like starting to pilot and starting to test and the idea of like bringing the front line in, bringing managers in, and I'm sure you're creating a sense of ownership. Assuming that that works, I'm curious from you, like I really have been thinking about this concept with you around like you're the 0 to 1 guy, like you're the one who like bravely takes it on. So what are like the three things that tell you that the foundation has been built and that a brand is ready to expand?
So first, it's understanding what we need to do and then building out a timeline so that you can present this timeline to the cafes or to the front of house and back of house so they understand like here's the breadth and the scope of what is about to happen. And then getting a temp check on that. Does this feel right?
Mm.
Does this feel like we can do these things in this amount of time? And can we space, is there enough space between sort of big milestones? So that initial temp check is number one. The other one is I like task management. Like, I'm 50% Swiss and 50% Italian. And so the Swiss really kicks in and it's like, where's that task? Show me the list, right? And so mapping that out and then just like project managing it, right?
Mm.
So you've got the temp check from the team, and then the project management is the tempo of like, are we on track? Are we going? Are we moving forward? And then the other big thing is, it's pretty fundamental, but trying to find a big win pretty early in the process. Yeah, it
I hear
just
that a
really
lot.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sets the tone. It feels really good when you're winning,
Mm.
and to kind of have that set up first, it gets people and myself like energized, like, okay, cool. Like we can do this. Let's go forward.
So can you give an example either from Verve or from a previous company of like what that early win was that kind of got the wheels moving?
I think a good example is like often at times I found that communicating efficiently through the kind of retail multi-unit concept is always kind of a crux. And there's oftentimes all departments will send communications to the field. And it's a way of helping the field, I suppose, right? So HR says like, hey, don't forget the handbook to sign this. Marketing sends something of like, here's this new poster, make sure you print it and put it up. And operations is doing their thing and so forth and so on. And it's really overwhelming. It's
Mm.
really overwhelming to be in the field. And at any second, you're going to get some kind of notification that says, can you do this? Operators are very responsive. right? We live in a world of like constant moving, going, and like things pop up all the time. And so the natural state of the cafe teams is like, oh, let me do this right now.
Yeah.
Let me just jump on it right now. And it's super stressful. And so one thing that has been really successful of saying like, okay, we're going to actually funnel all communications into one person on the operations team, and on a weekly basis we're going to publish the updates. So this way, then the cafes know, okay, cool. On Mondays, I'm going to get a list. It's going to be sort of our focus. This is what we're going to do this week. And I'm going to just, now I have it in one place. It doesn't get lost in communications. And I know it's coming on Monday. So the rest of the week, I just move forward and start working through that list. And it's amazing the shift that happens from just like mental presence and capacity of cafe managers or just the cafe team, because now they're not like constantly checking their
Right.
notifications. So that's a good like easy win, and it also starts to build the communication infrastructure to say like, here's how we're going to flow information on a systematic way.
It's such an easy, simple win, but when you've been in the weeds for 17 years, I'm sure that like you lose the immediate value of a quick change like that. So, yeah, I get it. And
Totally.
I still see large organizations that haven't done that yet from like a communication standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I want to kind of think about the opposite here. Not everything can have gone right when you're kind of getting things stood up. So, what's been your biggest learning from a time when you got the basics wrong early on? Was it like a misjudgment on your part or a misassessment? Did a priority change? Like what made the wheels stop on something?
Definitely a misjudgment on my side.
Mm.
And the biggest thing was not talking to everybody in the cafe, from like line cook to baristas, dishwashers, back of house, front of house. Early in my career, I really just was working with the regional managers or even the cafe managers and receiving the feedback, hearing what they want, and sort of taking that as like, okay, cool, let's go. Let's march forward. And then just a big old whiff of like, oh, hold on, the shift leads think something totally different,
Mm.
right? The back of house, like, no, 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 no. They see a whole different part of the business, and they have different priorities. And actually, if we make those decisions, it has a really big impact on them. So one example was we were working with receiving inventory, receiving orders, and how to put it away. And it was kind of chaotic, and our inventory was like kind of messy. And so when we took inventory, it was not very accurate. It was hard to manage our pars, and so we would run out of things, and or we'd over order. And so we're like, okay, we're going to implement this inventory management system. We're going to organize the shelves in this way. We're going to, do all these things. Looked great. Had a beautiful little diagram of like, this goes here and that goes there. And, we were all feeling really good. And then the back of house was like, what are you doing? Like, do you understand that on Fridays for the big weekends, we get double the volume? And where am I supposed to put this? And it was a simple thing, but I totally get it. It was very stressful for them on Fridays as we're going into the high season of the week to like try to adhere to this and put stuff away. And so what ended up coming out of that was, let's increase Mondays and Wednesdays order to keep a
Oh,
little bit more par. So
sure.
it flattened out the orders, because Mondays was like a big replenishment, Wednesday was like super light, and Friday was this enormous order. And it was just like this emotional like roller coaster that the team was going on. And so we flattened it out, and then it just became kind of systematic, right? Like, generally this is the size of the order I get, and I can manage it. And now I know how to manage it in this amount of time and where everything goes, and like, cool.
So is that what you think that other leaders get wrong who are kind of in your position? Is they're not spending time with the team on the ground? Or is there something
I think
else
so.
that can cause it? Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. And again, I learned this early in my career from Shake Shack, of understanding that my role and everyone else on the support team, that's not where the business is,
Mm.
right? The business is in the shacks, in the cafes, or with our wholesale customers. And that's where we need to be. That's where the information needs to come from. That's what we need to drive, and not some like initiatives that sound good and sound right, in the support office.
You know, there's been this massive shift over the last 10 years where training leaders are increasingly reporting to COOs. Sometimes we're even seeing them report to CEOs. Very different than the early aughts when everyone was reporting to HR. And I wonder if some of that is a product of exactly what you're describing, which is a lot of businesses are expanding the way that the food business is growing. And so we are seeing a need to actually build foundations for scalability, which means that high level operators are coming in and they're spending time training on the things that people
Yeah.
are doing, and they're seeing the errors, and they're starting to like thread the needle between this is a training problem, which we didn't see in 2000. A lot
Or
of it was like, this is a compliance problem.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm such an advocate that training needs to live within operations,
Mm,
right? Because that's what we're training. And yeah, there are compliance, sexual harassment, or food handlers, others that come from the HR team and should be, managed from that, from an employee compliance for sure. But the that's a small percentage,
yeah.
important percentage, but it's a small percentage of what we're actually trying to train. And I have found that when training lives in operations, way more effective than when it's in HR. Absolutely.
Is it because it's touching more use
Yeah.
cases though? Okay.
Oh, for sure. I think it's that, but also the content is coming from like the source, right?
Right. It's not through like the can with the string,
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that. Exactly. It's not that. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually makes a ton of sense. I actually think this is like a good transition into coming back to you. At what point in your career did you realize that this phase of company was really your specialty?
Mm.
Was there a moment where you were like, oh, this is where I thrive? Because this was a lot of what you did at Hot Bread Kitchen too. Like you've been doing this for a long time, helping businesses really build their basement. But
Yeah.
has that always been the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have this like amazing story when the light bulb went off and I was like, here I am. But I have had these moments, I grew up on a farm. My older brother and I are fourth generation, and it was just, it's really rooted in me in regards to food and farming and just the whole industry. And my first half of career was on that side in farming and in big manufacturing and logistics warehouse. And I've had moments when I think like, oh, maybe I'll step outside food and beverage. And it lasts probably 20 seconds. And I'm like, what? It's in your blood, right? It
Yeah.
is who you are. And so I've been very with great conviction that the food and beverage industry is what I know and also what I love. I'm super passionate about it. I try to just, do things that I think are valuable and making the world a little bit of a better place and that I really enjoy. So it's been that. And then, it's kind of organically happened where I've been in brands at this stage. But I did have a moment, growing up as a farmer, kind of an entrepreneur. It was kind of always there of, oh, maybe one day you start your own business. And I had a moment when I really realized that's not me. Like I'm not the like originator. Like I can't come up with a business idea, but I'm a really great number two. I'm
Mhm.
really great at taking a vision and then realizing it, building it, making it come to life, scaling it. And that's been a lot of fun. And I'm really happy that I learned that because I could have cashed out my 401k and been very unsuccessful.
Well, I love that perspective too, because the stories you hear are either the founder stories, or you hear the I wanted to be a part of the team, and you don't hear the number two piece. And it's
No.
like it's not a co-founder, it's not a business partner, but it's this like essential person who, and we have those people at Opus too. I can name three of them right now who
Mm.
like took the leap early on and said, "Oh, I like what you're doing. I trust this. I see your vision. We're not there yet, but like we'll get there." So
Yeah.
it takes a lot of
Amazing.
trust for you, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it takes, founders tend to be amazing founders, visionaries. They're changing the industries, they're changing their categories, but they're not all founders are great, sort of operators or just like business sort of like leaders or scalers. And I have had amazing founders that I've worked with where I've been able to learn the skill of let's kind of what do you say like meld our minds or like
Mm.
merge our minds together, right? So I can think like you, because that's helped me be successful of like, okay, here's the vision. I get it. I feel it. And now here's how we can make it come to life for our customers or for our team or the product. And that's always like kind of a fun thing to like kind of get into. I love the challenge and the creativity of it.
Well, yeah, and it's easy when you're a founder. I think speaking as one, like it's easy to get lost in the sauce where
Sure.
it's why you build a team that you trust, that it's not like my head's in the clouds all day, but I'm thinking about 30 years from now sometimes.
Yeah,
How are we going to change
totally.
the world? And you have to be like
100%.
wound back down.
Yeah. Yes, yes, that's so true. And if you operate that way, then it's not good, right? Because like today, we don't have today to get to 30 years, right? And so it is a different mindset and it's really important. It's not a skill I have. I don't have the skill of like, let me, tell you what life's gonna look like in 30 years, right? I'll tell you how to get there, but like, you need to tell me where we're going.
So I think with that in mind, when you're hiring for, thinking about people development, et cetera, at this stage, you really need builders versus just optimizers, right? And so how do you identify people who really thrive at like building something new versus the one who excel at those systems once they're already mature? Like what's the spark you're looking for?
Like passion.
Mm.
Like in most of the industries I've worked in, like you can train somebody how to do it, right? Like how to make the ice cream or how to talk about it or how to pull espresso in a cafe. Like a lot of that is trainable, but passion just like passion wins, right? I went to culinary school in Paris, and the chefs would always say, if you are mad, or if you're upset, or if your heart is broken, they're French, right? So if your heart is broken, then your food's not good. You
Hmm.
have to show up with like love and care and like passion. And it's definitely true. I've seen it in my own food. I've seen it with others where it's like, that wasn't good. It's not just food, it's the same in work, right? Like if people are passionate about it, then it brings it to a much better space. And so I look for people that are passionate about the brand, about the product, about our customers and guests, and that always wins.
Which I understand. It's kind of like creativity too, but like, and it's sort of like, Danny Meyer, it's like the EQ, all that.
Totally.
But like,
Yeah.
how do you interview for that? Like, how do you spot it early, or is it just luck at a certain stage?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's an element of luck for sure, but I think just listening to your gut, the intuition, right? And so then the process is definitely need to ask you some technical questions, right? Like if I'm asking you to step into a role, like say cafe manager, have you ever led a team before? Do you know how to write a schedule? Did you understand? Have you ever worked with a POS system? Like those are some technical things that, do need to get checked off, but the majority of my time with people is honestly it's just chatting. It's chatting around the core of the passion for the brand and the product. I don't subscribe to the idea of, hey, your coworkers should be people you want to hang out with. Like
Yeah.
I've seen that, and I don't think it works very well, because then it just creates this environment of uh, not just friendship, but it creates an environment of lack of accountability. And so I love it, and I want our team to be friends. And a lot of my friends are my coworkers or ex-coworkers, but I don't believe that you should hire based off of that. I think
Yeah.
you should, and so that's why I'm really focusing on like finding that passion around the brand and the product. And that's just conversations, right? In coffee, it's like, do you like coffee? How do you drink your coffee? What's your experience with it? And it just naturally will start to come out, and you'll start to find some threads to core values and the mission of the brand to say like, okay, that's connecting there. That's great. That looks good. Or that like, I'm not really seeing a lot of the connections there. And so maybe it's not a right fit.
The idea of just like teasing out the conversation piece, it reminds me of something I was thinking about the other day. A friend, we're hiring some folks at Opus, and a friend of mine who runs another tech company was hiring for this pretty big leadership role. And I said, "How did you know that this was the right person?" And he said, "I named 3 locations in New York, and I think it was like the Met, the library, or something, Mets or like Yankee Stadium or whatever." And he said, and I asked them to choose where they wanted to meet. And we spent time together. And I loved that idea at the time. This was years ago. And just the other day, I was thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting? Like, you pick the place, and I want it to be a
I like
place
that.
that's meaningful to you.
Yeah.
And so at like Verve, it could be like, I want to meet at a coffee shop that's not ours right now, and we can talk about,
I love that idea.
yeah,
Oh
and
my
like it
gosh.
sparks that kind of
Yeah.
meaningful beyond just the tactical stuff.
Yeah.
There's something really interesting about how do you tease out the human component
Yeah.
of someone when like it can kind of be a pretty rigid process.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a way that passion ends up getting sort of translated is through curiosity, right? If somebody is curious about the product and the brand and the company, and they're really like, tell me more, I want to learn, I want to understand, then that's a big signal to me of like, okay, you've got the right mindset. It's that it's that phase of the interview when you say like, do you have any questions for me? And people are like, nope, pretty good. It's like usually okay. No, I don't know.
So maybe sort of to bring this all back around, and then we're going to do the lightning round.
Cool. Okay,
Wanted
fun.
to there's just this tie back to training, and what I think what was really, in Verve, you very quickly identified that training was something that needed to be fixed very quickly. So what are kind of the outside of how you find out that that's the problem to solve? You see like there's paper XYZ, but as an operator and as a leader, how do you identify that training is the priority over all these other things that are going on?
Needs to be happening. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think, there's a sort of like a logical state where if you have multiple regions, then 100% you got to get on an LMS. Like it just, no matter how tightly you control that Google document, it's not going to be controlled. And so that's a big signal of like, oh, we've got multiple regions, we've got to get unified. And then if there's any element of, hey, we're going to scale, and you need an LMS to be able to have that structure. When I came here, there's been a lot of conversations around LMS, and we have a VP of training who's phenomenal and has been with the brand for a long time, and has been one of her long like dreams and wishes. And it so it was pretty easy for me to say like, okay, this has got to be a high priority. And then we have multiple regions, and then I went through training, and I'm like, okay, a lot of this is just like word of mouth. So let's work on that. So I think those are the big things that I look at.
Right.
And the biggest sort of hurdle has always been the cost to an LMS, right? Because like we've done it. It's free. A Google Doc is free, easy peasy. But I'll tell you, like once you get an LMS in place, the efficiencies you have with just consistency across team member to team member across the company, and then the efficiency of the actual training. LMS does not, in my view, remove the in-person training. It doesn't remove certifying on the floor, hip to hip training, shadowing is all like very important, but there's a lot of initial knowledge that can be very quickly learned, and learned in a better way than if I'm just telling you. Let me tell you the story of Verve. Here's a 20-minute story, and you heard nothing, right? Like so, like those kind of things, those sort of foundational pieces can get learned very quickly, and then the shadow shifts go much quicker. The knowledge retention is much greater. And so I have always been able to underwrite the LMS cost by showing here's how training alone is going to be reduced in terms of like number of hours, labor hours.
Yeah, which is so hard when you're not on a LMS. It's so hard to measure that because it is
Totally,
all word of
sure.
mouth and institutional. Well said. I obviously I'm biased, but like the blended learning experience I think is so important. I wanted to finish off today, Anthony, with our lightning round. You have to answer every question in less than 2 words,
Okay.
and it's only 4 questions, but try your best
Okay.
not to justify it. So you can't
Okay.
explain.
Okay.
um,
Okay. Okay.
all right. Number one, what was your first job? ever.
Working on the farm, shoveling. Well,
Second, what is a food trend that you're completely over?
the smokes.
What?
Like they'll bring you the plate and they open the thing and the smoke comes out. And like,
That's a new
ugh.
one. Yeah. I've heard fried chicken lately. Lots of fried chicken. What's the last great book you read or podcast you listened to? Butter? Okay. This is good. This is why we do one word. And what are you going back to basics on? In other words, like what are you trying to relearn or understand at this stage in your life?
Gardening.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Share your tips. Share your tips. I had a garden like early on and then like life happens and I'm like, you know what? I just love it.
Nothing, well, I'm in New York, so I don't have plants, but there's nothing I love better than repotting plants. I just like
Yes.
get in zen mode.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Absolutely. I love
Awesome.
it.